On the 18th of August, 1572, Paris hosted the biggest royal wedding France had seen in 50 years. 6 days later, the city was calculating the cost of removing the guests. Today we're doing royal weddings that ended in massacres, and I don't mean a scandal at the reception or one poisoned cousin found under a table. I mean guest lists that turned into casualty lists, dynasties that ended somewhere between the vows and the last course, and one bride who was eventually made a saint for what she did to the men who proposed to her. Let's get into it. Subscribe if you want the version of these events that didn't make it into the commemorative paintings. Nobody here is going to beg you about it. Number 1. Paris, 1572, and the wedding they had to hold outside the church. It's the 18th of August, and there's a wooden platform built in the open air in front of Notre Dame, because the groom isn't permitted inside. Marguerite of Valois is 19 years old, Catholic, and the sister of the King of France. Henri of Bourbon, King of Navarre, is 18 and the most important Protestant in the country. The entire purpose of this marriage is to end a religious war that's been running for 10 years, so the Protestant nobility of France has traveled to Paris, in numbers, to watch it happen. They're all in one city, at the invitation of the crown. It holds for 4 days. There's a story that Marguerite refused to say yes and that her brother the king put a hand on the back of her head and pushed it forward so the nod would count. That one comes from later accounts, so take it as you like. What's certain is that Henri walked out before the Mass and waited in the cloister because a Protestant king couldn't sit through a Catholic wedding service, even his own. 4 days later, on the 22nd, Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, the most senior Protestant in France and a man Charles IX had taken to calling father, was shot at from an upstairs window as he walked back from the Louvre. The shot took off a finger and shattered his arm. The house belonged to the Guise family. Everybody understood exactly what that meant. The king promised an investigation. On the night of the 23rd, the crown made a different decision, and before dawn on the 24th, which was St. Bartholomew's Day, the bell of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois started ringing. Coligny was killed in his lodgings by men working for the Duke of Guise and thrown out of the window into the street. After that, it stopped being an operation against a few leaders and became the city itself, militia and guild members, and ordinary Parisians working through the lodging houses with lists. Estimates for Paris run to 3,000 dead in a few days. Over the following 6 weeks, it spread to Orléans, Lyon, Rouen, Bordeaux, Toulouse. Estimates for the whole of France run from 5,000 to 30,000, and nobody's ever going to narrow that down. Bodies went into the Seine in quantities that towns downriver complained about. And here's the thing. The bride and groom were inside the palace for all of it. Marguerite wrote later that she was woken by a wounded man hammering at her bedroom door with archers behind him, and that she hid him and talked the archers back out of the room. Henri survived because he was now family. He was offered a choice between conversion and the alternative, converted, and then spent nearly 4 years at the French court as an extremely well-dressed prisoner before escaping in 1576 and changing religion straight back. The modern equivalent would be hosting a peace summit, inviting every senior figure in the opposition, paying for their hotels, and then closing the city gates. In Rome, the Pope had a Te Deum sung and commissioned a commemorative medal to mark the occasion. You can still go and look at one. Henri of Navarre became King Henri IV in 1589, converted one final time, and in 1598 signed the law giving French Protestants the legal right to exist. His marriage to Marguerite was annulled the following year, on the official grounds that neither of them had ever genuinely consented to it, which is the single most honest sentence anyone ever produced about that wedding. Number 2 is Philip II of Macedon, and this one is about a man who deliberately left his bodyguards at the door. It's October 336 BC at Aegae, the old Macedonian capital. Philip is marrying his daughter Cleopatra to Alexander of Epirus, who's also her uncle because this is Macedonian dynastic politics, and nobody present finds that remarkable. There are games, athletic contests, delegations from Greek cities that were at war with him 18 months ago, and gold crowns arriving by the crate. At sunrise, a procession carries statues of the 12 gods of Olympus into the theater. Behind them comes a 13th statue, built to the same scale as the others. It's Philip. Then Philip walks in alone. He'd sent his guard ahead, and he entered in a white cloak, unarmed, to make the point that a king this loved doesn't need protecting. He got about as far as the entrance. Pausanias of Orestis, one of his 7 personal bodyguards, was waiting there with a short Celtic dagger, and Philip was dead before anyone in the theater understood what they were watching. Pausanias ran for horses that were standing ready at the gate, caught his boot in a vine, and was killed on the ground by 3 of Alexander's friends, who may or may not have wanted him taken alive. Aristotle, who was writing at the time and had personally tutored Philip's son, says the motive was personal. Pausanias had been humiliated by the household of a general named Attalus, and Philip had declined to do anything about it because Attalus was too useful to punish. Diodorus adds that Philip had consulted the oracle at Delphi beforehand and got back a line about a garlanded bull and a waiting sacrificer, which sounds precisely like the kind of prophecy people remember after the fact. The really wild part is what the wedding cost afterwards. Within a year, Attalus was dead, killed in Asia on Alexander's orders. Amyntas IV, Philip's nephew and a legitimate claimant, was executed. 2 brothers of the Lyncestian royal house were executed at Philip's tomb during the funeral rites. Philip's last wife, Eurydice, and her infant daughter were both dead within months, and every ancient source points at Olympias, Alexander's mother. Those same sources loathed Olympias, so weigh it accordingly. A wedding arranged to bind 2 royal houses together and secure the succession removed every rival candidate for the throne in roughly 11 months. It's the ancient version of a founder dying the week before the launch, except the replacement turns out to be Alexander the Great, and the product is the Persian Empire. Philip had spent 23 years building the finest army in Europe for the specific purpose of invading Persia. He got to watch the invitations go out and nothing after that. Which brings us to Olga of Kiev. Number 3, and the one where you end up reluctantly admiring the logistics. One caveat first. Almost all of this comes from a single chronicle compiled in Kiev around 1113, about 170 years after the events, by monks who considered Olga a saint. The Byzantines confirmed the opening. The rest, take as you like. It's 945. Olga's husband, Prince Igor of Kiev, has gone back to the Drevlian tribe to collect their tribute for the 2nd time in one season. They send a message asking him to reconsider. He doesn't. He doesn't come home either. Leo the Deacon, a Byzantine writing within living memory, records that they bent 2 trees down, tied him between them, and let go. Olga is left in Kiev with a 3-year-old heir and no army she can count on, and the Drevlians, having just made her a widow, send 20 of their leading men upriver by boat to propose that she marry their Prince Mal on the reasonable basis that she has nothing better to do now. She tells them she's honored. She says that in the morning she'll send for them, and that when the summons comes they should refuse to walk and refuse to ride, and insist on being carried to her sitting in their own boat. They love this idea. Overnight, a trench is dug in the courtyard. In the morning, the boat is carried in with the 20 men still sitting in it, and dropped into the trench and covered over. The chronicle says Olga leaned across the edge and asked whether they found the honor to their taste, but it got weirder. She then sent word that she'd accept the proposal, but only if they sent a more distinguished delegation, since the first 20 had clearly been beneath her station. They sent their best men. She offered them a bathhouse to wash in before the audience. The doors were barred from the outside. Then she traveled to Iskorostan for a funeral feast at her husband's grave, told her host to drink, drank nothing herself, and the chronicle puts the number killed that night at 5,000. 3 separate operations, and every one of them required the targets to agree to the terms. That isn't revenge. That's project management. The year after, she besieged the town, couldn't take it, and offered peace for a token tribute of 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from every household. The town paid gratefully. Her men tied smoldering tinder to the birds and released them, and every bird flew home, and every home had a thatched roof. Olga was baptized in Constantinople about 10 years later and is a canonized saint of the Orthodox Church. Her feast day is the 11th of July. Kathmandu, the 1st of June, 2001. Number 4. The wedding that was never allowed to happen at all. It's a Friday, and the Nepalese royal family is doing what it does once a month: dinner at Narayanhiti Palace, drinks in the billiard room, no security inside the room because it's family. King Birendra is there. Queen Aishwarya is there. So is Crown Prince Dipendra, 29 years old, educated at Eton, a keen marksman, and heir to a dynasty that has ruled Nepal since 1768. He wants to marry Devyani Rana. His mother has spent years refusing. The objection is partly about which branch of the Rana family Devyani comes from, and partly about her mother's Indian aristocratic connections, and it hardens into an ultimatum. Marry her and forfeit the throne, or wait until you're 35 and marry someone the family selects. That evening, Dipendra left the room and came back armed. 9 members of his own family died, including the king, the queen, his younger brother, who was 22, and his sister, who was 24. He then turned the weapon on himself. Now here's what nobody tells you: he didn't die immediately. Under Nepal's succession, rules his father's death made him king. So for 3 days the country had a monarch lying in a coma in a military hospital, unable to be informed that he'd been crowned, with a regent governing in his name. He died on the 4th of June. His uncle Gyanendra took the throne. The official inquiry, run by the Chief Justice and the Speaker of the House, took 2 weeks and named Dipendra as the shooter. Large parts of the country never accepted it, partly because Gyanendra's immediate family happened not to be in that room, and partly because a great many Nepalis found the alternative unbearable. The theories are still circulating 25 years later. 7 years after the massacre, Nepal abolished the monarchy outright, and Gyanendra moved out. Narayanhiti is a museum now. You can walk through it as a tourist. The room is marked. The Shah dynasty held Nepal for 240 years and lost it in one evening, over a wedding that never happened. So there you have it. 4 royal marriages, and the mass graves they produced. Paris invited every Protestant leader in France to a wedding and buried them within the week. Philip of Macedon carried his own statue in beside the gods and didn't survive the games. Olga of Kiev buried 20 suitors in their own boat and was later canonized for it. And Nepal lost a 240-year dynasty because a young man was told who he wasn't allowed to marry. Every one of these marriages was arranged to prevent something: a war, a rebellion, a succession crisis, a scandal. Not one of them prevented anything, and 3 of them caused the precise disaster they were built to avoid. Which leaves a question that nobody standing in any of those rooms seems to have asked out loud. At what point does a wedding stop being a peace treaty and start being the one occasion where everyone who matters is gathered in a single room with the doors shut? If there's one I've left out, and there are several, put it in the comments. Half the lists on this channel start down there.